In our last update, we wanted to see Bitcoin continue its move up into our resistance area to then see a rejection, and our first target and support level was $105,300. And even though Bitcoin did take a while before getting that move down, we are seeing it, and it does seem like it wants to make that move towards again around $105,000. So as usual, before we dive into today's price action, let's quickly recap what happened. And for this one, it's pretty simple. Again, we just had one resistance. We made our move into it with a 4-hour imbalance. So I did open a short position, even though funding was actually going down, which of course is not perfect for a short position. But in the end, price ended up playing around the highs and I got stopped out of my short. But it makes sense now looking back at it with the funding rates being low. We just had to chop around the highs before making our way down. And then in our Sunday's live stream, we had one prediction, which was we wanted to see again, same scenario, a move down into support to potentially see a bounce and then continue lower. So is this scenario still valid, and what can you look for next? Well, today we do have new very important data, and these would be the new pivots. So if we start with the monthly pivots, what you will see is that this one comes in just above our support area. And that's perfect, because now if we get that move down into our support, this monthly pivot would be hit and this could offer a bit of a relief rally. So this first part of our plan is still valid in my opinion. However, if you add the quarterly pivot, what you will see is that this one actually comes in at $100,100. And if you remember what the support level was, it was simply the open of this daily imbalance. So this quarterly pivot is a bit too deep in my opinion. So overall, how does this affect my plan? Well, what I would say if we jump on the lower time frames is that, as you can see, we have two early imbalances and we have taken the liquidity below the lows of this range. So to me, we have two scenarios. The first one, which would be more bearish, would be that we leave the monthly pivot behind. If I add it on my chart again, is that for now we leave it behind, we get a bounce from here because we have two imbalances and we have taken the liquidity. So we get a bounce from here, we find resistance maybe somewhere above or somewhere around here, it doesn't really matter, but we find resistance somewhere up in this area before getting our move down to tap this monthly pivot but also hit our support area. And if we get this, this would be a more bearish scenario in my opinion that could offer a much bigger drop. Now of course you still have to be aware of the support because we could still get this and then chop around a bit more before continuing lower. But overall my point is that if we get a bounce here, which is likely in my opinion because we have two imbalances, this would be a bit more bearish and I would heavily expect lower prices and the tap of the daily open at $100,900. However, if we jump first, so if we simply do something like this, get a small bounce and then continue down, this would be a bit more bullish and then you can expect that big bounce. And in this case, to me, either we actually continue higher to make a new all-time high or at least break these highs at $110,700, or this goes back to Sunday's plan. We got a small bounce. I mean, not really a small bounce, but we got a bounce. And then you continue lower. But at this point, I would heavily expect the quarterly pivot to get tapped, which at this point would be pretty bearish because that retracement would be a bit too deep in my opinion. So we'll have to see what happens. Do we get that drop to tap the quarterly pivot, which would be pretty bearish in my opinion. And at this point, we get a small bounce before continuing lower, or actually with that retracement, even though would be very deep in my opinion, could this still offer a very big bounce to the upside? Okay, so that was mainly it for this update. A quick recap. Let's go on the lower time frames and remove all of this and go back to the monthly pivot. So right now, I just want you to focus on this lower time frame scenario and then we can see what happens next. If we get a bounce from here, this would be more bearish because then we leave that monthly pivot behind, which would be a target for that job. And at this point, I don't know how interesting this support level would be, simply because we trap more longs before getting that job, okay? So that would be a bit more bearish. If you get that bounce, you can open short positions up there if you find any resistance level. On the other hand, if you continue on dropping, that would be a bit more bullish. And then at this point, I would be pretty confident in seeing a bounce, potentially to just follow what we outlined on Sunday to continue lower. But on the other hand, we could simply hit that monthly pivot, leave the quarterly pivot behind, and then move much higher. So with all of that said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this update. And if you did, as usual, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.